We're so happy to start. The session is a very special one for us. So while you get on board, just tell us where you're from, where you're listening from on the chat so that we know we have people with us. Yay. So I think now we're on. So hello everyone. Buenos dias. Oi para todo mundo. We are hosting this international session today with this very special guest, Monali. Hi, Monali. She's talking to us from California. And in a moment, she will introduce herself. But I just want to know who's here with us. So if you can say hi and where you're from. And then we can just start our conversation about the very important topic of the culture of your startup, of your company, and a few examples that we have for you from the Google journey and some other examples that Monali will share with us from her background too. Olá, Pietro. Hello, Jen. You're here again. Pedro. Oi, Fábio. BH comparecendo. I'm just checking out the cities. Oi, Ju. Just saying hi to a few folks. So let me explain to you all what's this about. So we have at Google for Startups advisors from all over the world, Googlers from all areas, from Google, all product areas, even companies that are not Google, like Monali. She's from Waymo, that is our self-driving car unit. She will, it's not, I don't know if we call self-driving car, autonomous cars, so she will explain to us. And these advisors come to work with our startups for a few weeks and help them build important pieces of their businesses. So Mona Lisa is expert on all people matters and culture matters. So she's been with one of our startups, Vitude. I don't know if there's someone from Vitude at the call with us, but I bet they will be. So these advisors stay with us remotely this time. But we are able to achieve a lot working with the startups remotely, and we're very productive for sure. So we also bring some advisors to this type of events where we can share a little bit more with you all. So today our goal is to talk a little bit about some concepts and some examples, how to build a great culture for your startup. And then we'll open for questions. So please have in mind that you can add questions to the chat while Monali is presenting. And I will do my best to bring her the questions in the best moment or after she finishes her presentation. Also, I want to remind you all that we'll have a feedback form in the end that is very important to us to know what you're thinking about the content and how it was for you, so we can always improve and bring interesting stuff for our communities. So I think without further ado, I want to ask Monali to introduce herself so we can start the session. Welcome, Monali.
Thanks, Faye. Hi, everyone. I'm Monali, and I'm a people partner at Waymo, which used to be known as Google's self-driving car project. We are a startup within Alphabet, and recently we raised our 2.25 billion in our first round of funding. External funding, I should say. And my magic moments at Waymo include drafting the company's values, also leading our company's equity, inclusion, and diversity initiatives, and also developing our job competency model for our company that will help our employees in their own career advancement. So without further ado, we will start to talk about culture, and the goal for today is to make this a interactive session. And so I'll talk a little bit before we talk about where does culture intersect with the business. I'd love to get a understanding of the foundation of culture and the basics of culture. What is the definition of culture? So the dictionary definition of culture is that it is a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or an organization. And so if you think about it, the culture of an organization is intangible, and it's intrinsic. It's not something you can feel, or rather you can touch, but it's something you can feel or experience it, in the actions that the company takes, in your daily interactions with a coworker, with a client, with a customer, the way you handle decision making. And so culture is really fluid. Uh, so, what are some foundations of a culture? And the core of the culture, if you will, it starts off with trust. These are like the basics. It's almost similar to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the core tenets of a culture is trust, respect, psychological safety, which we at Google have studied really, really deeply, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's also about challenging the status quo in the sense of innovation, looking at what is out there today, what could be done, being curious. It's about collaboration as well as learning, right? And so, if you think about culture, especially early on, as a startup, culture is an ongoing negotiation. As you hire more employees and as your company grows, it's about my beliefs and my patterns versus and my values versus your beliefs and your values. And as a founder and as a CEO, it's important to know when will you negotiate on that particular thing that relates to your culture, and what are your non-negotiables. For example, we at Google, you have a no jerks policy. And so that is our non-negotiable. You could be technically really, really smart, one of the smartest people in the room, but if you can't get along with people and you can't collaborate well with them, then that doesn't help our culture. And so that's not something we're willing to negotiate with. Also, you might have heard about culture ad. And while culture ad is extremely important, during early stages of a startup, culture fit is much more important than culture ad because you want to get the right team in place first. And then also, culture varies slightly based on locations, based on different functions within the organization. And it's that variation that makes it unique and authentic. So finance might have a slightly different culture than your marketing team or than your engineering team, where you want them to take bigger risks and you want them to, take higher chances. So before we dive deeper into culture, I wanted to share a snippet of a video from Larry and Sergey from their days back in 2000, when Google was 170 employees. And you see Sergey talking here about the challenges that they face as growing the company.
One is on deploying a service that's going to serve millions of people. When we were at Stanford, we had 10,000 people using our service, or about 10,000 searches per day, I should say. And now we serve over 50 million searches per day. And that scaling of infrastructure, that's pretty challenging. On a more personal level, I think I'm now the president of Google, and we have about 170 people now. And I think managing people and being emotionally sensitive and all the skills you learn in terms of communication and keeping people motivated. I think that's been a challenge, and I've enjoyed learning that. But that's an important and a hard thing to learn.
And so you see, even one of the brilliant minds that have walked the earth, I would say, in my opinion, dealing with emotions and dealing with human emotions and helping our employees channel those emotions in a way that benefits the company and that ties with the overall mission of the company is very important. And it's your values and your attitudes on how you help those employees get there that really drive the culture of the organization. So some main elements of Google's culture. Google, or Alphabet, I would say, broadly speaking, we pride ourselves in our talent and in the employees that we have. And, we believe that our success is enabled by our culture, our ways of working, and our market leading talent. And so we hire great talent, and then when they come in, we don't give them a lot of direction on what to do, because these are smart people, and so we want them to help us figure out how we need to do things. Especially at Waymo, where we are a startup within Google, within Alphabet, we are bringing the most talented people in the autonomous industry, and in their own domain, and we want them to come in and help us figure out this really hard problem. And so we give them the freedom and ownership to make decisions. And we'll talk about that as we go into further detail. But I'll start off with back in the day in 2001, Larry really wanted to start off with the values for the company. And so the first core value of don't be evil was adopted. And so, the way they talk about it is start with, we want to do good for the world. That's our basis, and that's our starting point. And then we ask 3 questions. Is this good for our users? Is this good for our customers and our partners? And will this transform an industry? And generally, that's a good place to start off with. Generally, good things come out of those conversations, and it guides us in the right direction. Our second core tenet of our culture, or of our values, is innovation. As you all know, innovation is what makes Google Google, or what makes Alphabet Alphabet. And we really pride ourselves, and we invest in innovation and in the things that we think are important to do. If you read Larry's letter in 2004, when the company was, first went through an IPO, in his first shareholders letter, or first letter to invite investment, he was very clear about how they were going to run the company. And how they were going to be in it for the long term. They wanted shareholders that were in it for the long term, because they believed that short-term focus eventually drives mediocre profits. They also talked about how they value their talent and how they're going to invest in those talents. And they talked about the perks that they provide Googlers. And as Eric Schmidt said in one of the videos, Google is Google because of its people, because of the Googlers. And so they've created an environment in Google where innovation can be encouraged, and it evolves organically, because it's not something that you can force, right? You can't tell your scientist, go innovate and deliver a new product, but you can create an environment which encourages creativity. We also understand that making these big bets, there's high chances of failures, and we encourage failures. In fact, we celebrate them. And so the way we celebrate them is we do a retrospection on any of our failed projects, and we look at what could be done differently and what are some learnings that we've learned from this. So the 4 foundations of innovation, the way we look at it is, it's based on curiosity, agency, collaboration, and risk-taking. And so curiosity is basically, it's the habit of constantly wondering why things are the way they are, and why couldn't they be done differently, and questioning them in terms of what would it be if it was different, right? And so we generate a ton of ideas. In fact, we have this, even today, to this day, we have this program called the 20% program, or the 20% project. And what that is every Googler can take 1 day a week to work on a project that they themselves are passionate about, that will benefit Google. And so some great products have come out of this. Gmail was part of this, AdSense, Google Maps. And that's what's kept Google innovative and and successful. Waymo, our self-driving car company. I mean, if you were to think about it 10 years ago, it didn't seem like a possibility. Right now, we have our self-driving cars driving in Phoenix, Arizona. And so they're actually, taking passengers and driving them from their homes to the places that they're going, and safely. The margin of error is almost zero, I would argue. Agency also is about actively involving people in your decisions. Because we hire smart people, we want to involve them and we want to get their input in making an important decision. And so decision making at Google is very collaborative. The next two tenets are collaboration and risk taking. And so collaborations, we have fantastic tools within Google that help us collaborate better. So our Hangouts feature, our chat feature, our G Suite, or even our Drive for that matter, which encourages even offline syncing and offline collaboration, it makes things move faster. Especially with COVID, the impact that we had was in a flip of a minute, we had almost all of our employees, at least beginning in the US, were working remotely and they were working from their homes. And so it was these services and these products that allowed us to continue on our collaboration, continue on our work and our projects, even while we were dealing with a pandemic. And then risk taking. So this is risk taking is part of it, if you think about it, is about psychological safety. Right? Like if I feel like I'm going to get punished for an idea that I took, or there's going to be repercussions for an idea that I pitched and that failed, I might not be willing to take that risk. But if risk taking is encouraged, because I know that we have a blameless culture, and that we do a postmortem purely for learning reasons, rather than punishing someone or humiliating someone, I would be more willing to pitch my idea to my executives. And so that's the approach that we take. Our postmortems are expected after any significant undesirable event. And then writing a postmortem is not like a punishment. It's actually a learning opportunity. And we've actually used those in other product areas within the company. And we do this openly. We, in fact, at X, which is our research arm, we celebrate failures. So we have the Day of the Dead, right? And we take that day and we look at all of the projects that we started and how we performed on them and what we learned. And the project leads come up on the stage and they talk about what they learned. And then they also talk about where else those projects could be applied. So Google Glass, although there may or may not necessarily be a lot of adoption, it actually has a huge impact and a huge benefit to other projects and other bets. So this is another video from Larry that talks about innovation, not just from products and business, but also day to day, how we, so we call ourselves Waymonauts as Waymo employees. It's like an astronaut, but right, a Waymonaut, and then Googlers, and how this is part of our day-to-day culture.
We also like to innovate in our physical space, and we noticed in meetings, you have to wait a long time for projectors to turn on and off, and they're noisy, so people shut them off. And we didn't like that, so we actually, in maybe a couple of weeks, we built these little enclosures that enclose the projectors, and so we can leave them on all the time, and they're completely silent. And as a result, we were able to build some software that also lets us manage meetings. So when you walk into a meeting room now, it lists all the meetings that are happening. You can very easily take notes, and they just get emailed automatically to all the people that were present in the meeting. And as we become more of a global company, we find these things really affect us. Can we work effectively with people who aren't in the room, and things like that? And simple things like this can really make a big difference. We also have a lot of engineers in those meetings, and they don't always do their laundry as much as they should. And so we found it was pretty helpful to have laundry machines for our younger employees especially. And we also allow dogs and things like that. And we've had, I think, a really fun culture at our company, which helps people work and enjoy what they're doing. This is actually our cult picture. I just wanted to show quickly. We had this on our website for a while, but we found that after we put it on our website, we didn't get any job applications anymore. But anyway, every year we've taken the whole company on a ski trip. A lot of work happens in companies from people knowing each other and informally. And I think we've done a good job encouraging that. It makes it a really fun place to work. Along with our logos too, which I think really embody our culture when we change things. In the early days, we were actually advised we should never change our logo because we should establish our brand, because you'd never want to change your logo. You want it to be consistent. And we said, well, that doesn't sound so much fun. Why don't we try changing it every day?
So, by the way, that ski trip, it's still an annual thing. Even at Waymo, we have an annual ski trip where all our employees go, and we get to mingle with one another. We get to know each other outside of work, and it generates ideas. It helps build an environment of collaboration and fosters, nurtures relationships. So I realize I was maybe going a little faster. So I want to pause and see, Faye, if we have any questions.
Yeah, actually we have, and I think there's one from Leonardo that also fits in this video from Larry right now. So he's being very vocal about the culture. He's like telling people, this is Google. We change our logos every day. We put the ski trip picture on the website. So Leonardo is asking, what do you think about these companies that really put their culture out there, like their manuals about what we are about, like Netflix? He's giving an example here that's very kind of like trying to attract the people that want to come to the company in a hiring strategy using the culture. What do you think about that? Is it like something that you recommend?
I think it depends on the stage of your company. So this video, although the video is from his early days, it came about around like 2002 or 2003. And so if you remember, Google was incorporated in 98. So it still had a few years of growth. And once it was a certain, employee count and certain size, that's when it made more sense to talk about it. However, I am a big believer that the more you say it, then you're setting expectation that you're going to deliver on it. And so I think within your organization, with your managers and your team, yes, I would talk about it. I would talk about what your norms are. How do you interact? How do you expect to interact with one another? Day-to-day decision making as well about how you hire someone, or even how do you fire someone. What is that employee's experience when they are leaving the company? That is equally important as to when you're hiring them, because that stays true to who you are. If you're very inviting and you're very you want to make it very collaborative when they join, but then towards the end of their journey, sometimes employees don't work out. Maybe there's performance issues, and maybe there are personality issues, and you don't want that to be a reason why the employee leaves thinking that this was not the right fit for them, right? And so you want to stay true to who you are. I definitely would talk about it. I would encourage employees to live it, and even create a space for psychological safety where they can challenge behavior that is not in line with your culture, especially as a startup. If you want to create a space where people feel comfortable to say, hey, you know what, maybe that's not the right way that we want to approach this. Let's look at what does other options look like, right? So it's not about challenging or making it personal, but it's about brainstorming, staying true to who we are. Hope that helps.
Yes, and also like just building upon this too. If we can touch about how we are moving everything to remote, still keeping the culture. This was the question from Adriele. She was thinking how the events can also be fun when everyone is working from home, right? How can you still maintain the culture in a remote setting? So if you have some ideas on that right now, or if you want to touch on this while you move with the presentation, I think will be helpful for everyone.
Yeah, I would say some of the things are organic. Right now, the most important thing is the manager and employee relationship and the touch point between them.
Yeah.
And so that sense of belonging, right? Because when you're in the office, you can belong, you can sit together with your team, you can have lunch together, go for a walk together. But being remote, especially when if you have families or if you have kids running around in the background, it makes it challenging. And so some of the things we've tried is hosting happy hours. And it's at a time where it's the most accommodative to everyone. So it may not be your standard 5 p.m. happy hour. Maybe it's 3 o'clock. We've tried to do monthly lunches with the teams. And so it gets to know, what are you eating? What did you make? If it's a happy hour, we'll have people take rotations, and they'll send you a list of ingredients, and then it's their cocktail recipe, and then everybody makes that and has that drink together. So those are some ways. I think also talking to employees about what is important for them during this time. How can you help them with juggling both personal as well as work life, which the boundaries are crossing into one another. I think that is an important aspect. I'll talk about this a little bit, which leads me right into our next section, is PyLab. So PyLab is Google's people analytics team. It's where HR meets science. And the people analytics team conducts applied experiments within Google. They check for things like, what are the most effective approaches for managing people? How do you maintain a productive environment, including the type of rewards that make employees the happiest? It also checks. It also has a wide variety of other research that they've done. For example, there was one of their findings was that they improved employee health by reducing their calorie intake of employees that ate at their facilities. And then the way that they did it was, of course, based on science and data and experiments. But they just reduced the size of the plate, and that helped the portion control of the employees' food, and that helped with making better food choices. And so one of the things that PyLabs is looking at right now is looking at what does remote work environment look like? What does it mean for employees right now? What are some things that we can support them, some ways that we can help them through this? The third pillar of our foundation or of our culture and values is googliness. And I'm sure all of you have heard this term. If you were to Google what googliness means, it's a person who is humble, curious, conscientious. They thrive in ambiguity, and that they love to learn. And this is so one of the research that PyLabs conducted was, what does it really mean to be googly? Because there really isn't a definition, there isn't a criteria that this is what googliness means. And that was deliberate, and that was on purpose. The reason is because when PyLabs conducted the research, googliness meant different things for different employees. And so for some, it was all about ethics, it was about partnership. For some, it was about exploration, innovation. Some it was about relationships. And we realized all of that is what makes Google Google. And so rather than defining what googliness means, we wanted it to take a form of employees encouraging citizenship behaviors. And we call it citizenship behaviors because that's part of being a citizen, a good citizen, right? And so the two main questions that the PyLab asked employees when they were researching what does googliness mean is what are some examples of that they have seen within the organization, or any things that have been done, or any experiences that they've had outside of their core jobs that contributed to Google's culture. And then the second question was, what influences this behavior? And then we used statistical analysis, like hierarchical linear models, to compare predictor variables and identify the strongest influences on googly behaviors. And so what we found was it was an ever-evolving thing. And it was a key component of a citizenship behavior. And it was, so the way to think about it is it's something that's helpful, but it's not required to do your job. Right. And so being an engineer, let's say, like if you bring it down to the basics, you need to know how to code. But coding is not a googly behavior. And so what do you do with your work? How do you collaborate? That's an example of being googly. And then, like I said, PyLab right now, what we're trying to also understand is how do we lead brands and employees through, like, this is probably one of the steepest learning curves of anyone's professional career, how to deal with a pandemic, how to understand the impact that it has on multiple aspects of our life, and what does that mean for the professional life. And so that's something that we're looking at when we're trying to understand. Some additional little tidbits about Google's culture. So Larry and Sergey have always been very unconventional when it comes to running a company. A majority of you might have also heard about articles where they didn't believe in managers, and they believed every engineer, every employee should be able to work. They don't need managers to run the company. And so because all of our decisions are made based on data and science, we actually conducted a research of what makes a good manager. And from that research and statistical analysis came out Project Oxygen, which is a set of tools and guidelines and trainings for managers on what does it mean to be a manager? How do you show up? What are some ways that you can foster employee productivity? But then also, what does that mean for you? Because you wanna talk about both. What does it mean for my employee? But then why am I spending so much time on management? How is it going to benefit me? And so we leverage those things. Okay. So these are just some little examples of our culture. Like, because culture is not something that can be, or innovation is not something that can be forced, we create environments that generate curiosity. So no matter what office of Google you go to in the world, you will find it at, a really interesting place. I was recently not recently, but before the pandemic, I was in New York City at one of our offices, and we had probably a 10 feet Ferris wheel made of Legos. And I'd taken my son with me, and he just couldn't believe, he thought this was like the coolest place on work. We also have a culture in terms of talking about challenging the status quo. From early on days of incorporation, we have this thing called All Hands, or TGIF, which is, thank God it's Friday. And it was every Friday, Sergey and Larry would talk to employees about what's happening within the company. They would share every single detail about the company. They would promote transparency, and it was also a place where employees could ask challenging questions. Why did we make this decision? What were we thinking about? How do you think it's going to benefit us? To this day, we still have TGIFs at Google. We also have TGIFs at Waymo. And we have these questions, and sometimes these are really hard questions that employees ask to our leadership team. Okay. So talking about innovation, we talked about psychological safety. And so this is related to Project Oxygen, that talks about how do you foster psychological safety within your team, and what are some tools and resources a manager can use to create trust within your team, that helps then have healthy debates within the organization. It's not so much as a disagree and commit culture, but it's more help me understand. Like I'll keep asking you questions until my until like all my needs are met, until all my questions are heard, and I feel that I have all the answers I need. And so and we encourage that. Okay. So this is talking about the intersection of culture and business growth, right? And so, we've seen so many companies either really do well because of their culture, like Zappos, or companies that fail because of their culture, right? And so the reason for that is employee satisfaction and employee engagement is one of the biggest factors that influence a company's chances of success. The more motivated, the more engaged your employees are, the better they're going to do their jobs, and the better the impact is to the end user or the end customer. And
Monali, yeah, on this point, if I can just interrupt you for a minute, there was an interesting question from Emerson that he's asking about what can we do about the people that don't fit the culture that's in the company? Do we simply say goodbye to them and send them to their next adventure, or is there a way that we try to see if people can change and fit? So if we have this on the hiring process, of course it will be easier to see the people that fits, but when there is a clear no fit, how do you see that someone at Waymo could learn, or at least at Google, how do we treat this type of case?
I would say if you identify someone that isn't the right fit, you've been through the conversations with them and you've figured out this isn't the right fit. Especially as startup, you want to make decisions fast, especially decisions around culture fit. And so that doesn't mean you terminate the employee tomorrow or you separate with the employee tomorrow, but start engaging in those conversations depending on what the role is. So if it's a head of sales that you've hired and you don't see that this person is the right fit, they're not collaborating, they're not partnering with you, then I would have a conversation with them saying, these are the areas where I need to partner with you, and these are the areas that are not aligning with my vision or the culture fit that I want to create. And so I'll give you an example. The one way, so we look at our entire life cycle of our employees, and we want to make sure we're making the right decision at every stage of their life. So right from selection and attraction to hiring, to their life within their journey within the company, and then their exit. And so one of our research has found is managers themselves cannot make good hiring decisions. And there's a lot of reasons for that. They're biased in the sense there's work pressures that they're dealing with. They're expanding the team. Their current team needs their time. They're also focused on business objectives. And so any person by themselves, single-handed, may not be, there might be a lot of biases that influence that decision making. And so what we've done is at all of our bets, we have a hiring committee. And I've actually, working with my startup partner to incorporate this into their company as well. And so, because think about this, you as the founder, as the CEO, have a pretty good idea of what you need. And that's going to set you up not just for today, but also for 2 years. You hire that individual, and that individual has almost a good idea of what you need as good as you. And so then they go out and then they hire this other person. Now that person has somewhat of a good idea of what you need and how that aligns with your company's strategy. And then soon enough, you go further down, you end up with mediocre talent and mediocre skill sets. So the way we run hiring at Alphabet is we have a hiring committee. So we have an interview panel and that is cross-functional. And so they interview the employee. The hiring manager submits a hiring manager support statement saying why they want to hire this person, how their skill set align with their current team, what is the path for them. And then there's an independent hiring committee that reviews that packet and then makes the decision of whether or not to hire the person. And so this is a way to check for a lot of different biases, unconscious biases. It also allows for better culture test. So if I am a head of sales and I have a head of marketing interviewing my candidate, they're going to check for how this person is going to collaborate with their team. And so that helps build the right culture. It also helps identify any needs that are stemming across the company. So if your sales are going high and you're really bringing in a lot of new clients, but your customer support team is not growing fast enough, you're not going to be able to provide them the customer service that you need to. And so this kind of then helps them understand what's going on in the other team's world. And they can say, hey, you guys we're bringing in sales really fast. We need to start investing in our customer service organization.
Perfect.
Okay. Also identifying your culture and who you are as a company, it helps you guide decisions in terms of where are we going to invest, right? Who are we going to hire? Who are we going to retain? Who are we going to serve? What is our business model and what does our customer set look like? And who are we going to partner with? Who are going to be our vendors and our suppliers that have the same values as we do? Who are our manufacturing partners that have the same values as we do? Because when you're making these partnership decisions, you want to make sure that one, there's an alignment of your core values, right? Also, you want to make sure that these partners are in it for the long term, that they share the same purpose as you do. And you want your partners to be complementary of your strengths. So, for example, you are a research organization. Maybe you need data analytics. And so whether that's an in-house role or whether that's a company you hire, maybe initially until you need that subject matter in-house, that's a partner, and understanding how are they going to complement what you're doing is critically important. Another thing to consider is, are these partners going to co-develop with us, or am I going to hire them for a particular service and then we're going to part ways? And then you want your partners to be, sharing your journey, both of success and as well as your failures. So, for example, your supply chain efficiencies, right? They depend very much on cooperation and effective communication on multiple different functions, both within your organization as well as your partner organization. And so as time goes by, these relationships get stronger, cooperation is stronger, and your processes are streamlined, which helps respond to your customer needs faster. Customer service, same thing. Even mergers and acquisitions, about 70% of M&A deals fail because of there not being a culture fit. And so those are some things to test early on when you're thinking about it. Safety. At Waymo, one of our core values is safety. And so it's extremely important for us that the partners we partner with are equally safety focused, because that is not something that is our non-negotiable, and we cannot be with partners that take people's lives, because people's lives are at risk, right? And so we want to partner with companies and with agencies that understand what that means for us. And I'll give you a good example of this. Reverb.com, it's a online musical marketplace. And it's based out of Chicago here in the US. And they are just phenomenal in their customer service. And they place equal importance on their own company culture as well as their brand. So they value the two almost similar, equally. And what they do is, so their biggest competitor is eBay, and they like outperform eBay when it comes to online musical instruments, like by a large difference in the numbers. And the way that they do it is their employees are, rather than giving them a standard pitch to sell a product, they encourage their employees to create their own dialogue and create their own content that's inspired by their own personal preferences and reverence. And so, they feature their own artists, their own music that the employees like. And this creates a unique experience for each separate customer, each individual customer, right? And because of that, like they have customers that put down $10,000 just to buy something, but to buy a guitar, even without playing it. It's all done online. Okay, and then next I have we'll share the deck at the end. And so these are some examples of practical guides as well as templates that you can use that we've developed at Google. This is part of our PyLab research. And so this is tested, this is validated, and this is great. We have a link called Rework, which is a great resource for companies. It's free for you to use, and it has great examples and templates on, on managing your people team.
That's super important for us to share practical things with our community. So I wanted to ask a question right now about what do you think is the best way to start? So a group of people of what size is already enough to start a conversation about, oh, these are our values, this is how our culture will be promoted externally. So already starting the questions from the beginning, what tips would you give for someone that's starting a business when they should start the culture? Because I know that some founders have it all in their heads and they just put it on paper and then they go building with the first employees, but it's not always like that. So not everyone is so creative about your own purpose with the company. So what tips would you give on this start of the process of building culture and values?
I would say it's very important to when you start hiring people, to start thinking about who we are, what are we trying to do. So like what is your mission and vision statement, and then the how are we going to accomplish that, right? That's part of your strategy, but the how is also of the values. And so what are some ways that we would interact? What are some ways that that decision making happens within the company? I would say maybe like something, to your point, Faye, a low touch, informal way to start is maybe creating a set of norms with your leadership team. And I wouldn't make them too big. I would start with maybe 3 or 5, and it's not something that's set in stone. So you always iterate on it, you always revisit it, but set with your basics. What does decision making look like within our company? What does collaboration look like within our company? Is it important, or are we pretty vertically focused and we don't really need to collaborate? It's not really a case with a lot of people, but just an example. And so once you have those set of norms, then reinforce them. What we also do as Waymo, because we are also a startup, is we also visit our norms every quarter to say, okay, we've been incorporating these norms in our behaviors. How are we doing? Do these still make sense? Are they still providing you what you need? Do we need to tweak them? And then the set of norms might be, you could have your 5 that are your guiding principles, if you will, that guide your attitudes and your behaviors. And then your norms would be the how are we going to incorporate these principles into our lives. And so it might be slightly different from one team to the other team.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. I was thinking also on this note about building a culture for someone that is the founder or the CEO. if he has a great idea on how the culture should be, so he attract the best talent and he looks very good to the public, but is not exactly what he has inside, or he doesn't walk the talk, do you feel that this works? So he have a beautiful thing on his wall with the culture, but he is not really what he does in the daily routine. Do you think that works, or for a while, or is it very dangerous not to have from the inside out on the founders, like living the culture every day?
I think you already know the answer to this, Faye, right?
I just want to make it very
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is extremely important for you as the CEO, as the founder, even as the leadership team, to walk the talk, because employees are watching you, whether you know it or not. So when you're in a conference room and you're having lunch together, when you leave the room, and if you don't clean up after yourself, employee, that is part of your culture. And so those are the unspoken, unwritten norms that employees say, oh, maybe it is okay to leave trash. And that then permeates into respecting the team, respecting the space that you're working in, right? um, like I said before, it's also important about the decisions that you make, and the sharing of those decisions. So typically, as a private company, you're not obligated, especially in the US, you're not obligated to share your earnings or your financial statements with your employees or publicly, right? And so some startups may say this is not part of our culture, and we're not going to share information with our employees. Well, that's the culture you're building. That then leads to silos. That leads to a lack of psychological safety, or psych safety, as we call it, and that doesn't encourage collaboration. That doesn't encourage or foster, building relationships. So it's really important to think about how you're showing up in meetings. Also, when you're in a meeting where, as a founder and a CEO, who's doing the talking? If you're doing most of your talking, that sets a certain tone. If your employees are doing the most of the talking, then that says something about your culture. So be mindful of that and know when you're running the meeting versus when you want opinions.
That's great. So I have another question from the beginning of the live stream from Camilo that I think is important for us to touch. Maybe you have some great advice for our community. So if there is a founder that's toxic, so a person that doesn't treat others with respect, doesn't have a great communication style, or is putting too much pressure on everyone. So it's clear that it's not a great culture from the top. How do you think one could help this person? What would you suggest? I know it's different if it's the co-founder or if it's someone on the team, but if you could give some tips or it's just better to just split the company. That was the question from Camilo. I don't think we have to be so extreme to start, but if you could give some advice on how to treat this type of behavior from someone.
I think the most important thing to start off with is that person open for change and open for feedback? Because if they aren't, then no matter what, who you bring into the company or what tools you provide to them, they might not be able to move. However, in my personal experience, both at Waymo and with other companies, when you can bring data to your topic or conversation, it it takes out the personality, it takes out the me in the conversation. And so I would take a look at what is the data saying? What does your retention rate look like? What does your attraction rate look like? What does your partnership look like? How fast are you able to bring partners on board? If you have a board or investors or your VC partners, maybe you can leverage someone from there to have the conversation with the founder or the co-founder, because that's a challenging position, right? Like that, leaving a co-founder is almost the person that had the vision. And so are we losing some key insight by making that change? And so I agree with you, Faye. Maybe I wouldn't start off with just completely separating. I would engage. There's a lot of different. One of the things that I did with one of the startups I was working with is we brought in a leadership coach and we did a CEO intervention, if you will. So we had an offsite on building effectiveness and team effectiveness, and we engaged in behaviors. We engaged in sessions where we went around the table. We talked about what was working, what wasn't. We also do this thing called new leader assimilation, which is basically about you're a new leader or you have a new team. How are you assimilated with one another? What are some things that are working? What are some things that aren't? And so that again takes out the role that I play in it as the founder, but it makes it more about the team, and that there's some grooming involved. You have to work with the leader to help them be able to digest this feedback. But yes, yes,
I
definitely invest in
completely
that.
agree. Like when we bring the facts and put the emotions aside, you are much more efficient in pointing out what can be improved. So even when there's a person that seems like to be a problem. So I hope, Camilo, this helps you out if you're dealing with some situation like that. So I just wanted to make a reminder to everyone before I do my last question here that we have a feedback form. You can see the link right below our beautiful faces here, or it's on the chat too. And if you can leave us your feedback, you will also have in return the deck, the slides that Monali presented today. So thank you so much for contributing with us with your opinion. And the last question that I wanted to pose to you, Monali, is from 360 Corporate Benefits. That is one company that always is in our live streams. And of course, they are asking about the benefits and how this reflects in your company culture. Do you think there's room like for different benefits for the employees that will reflect a little bit of the company culture? What's your take on that?
I think absolutely. If you look at Silicon Valley, the employee benefits and the perks that employees are offered is one part of attraction. It's almost become a given to have free food. However, the quality of food is now, a discussion. But so Larry and Sergey, in their first letter to when they invited people to invest in the company for their IPO, was that they always provide perks to the employees, and that their commitment to their shareholders was these perks will increase. And the reason for that, the research and the science behind it is when employees don't have to worry about things that are just, don't require a lot of mental effort, but require a lot of physical effort. If you can make it easy for them, they can be much more productive and much more engaged at work. And so if I don't have to figure out what I need to make for dinner, when there's a Google Cafe, 2 blocks down, then I am much more engaged. I can, stay in the office a little bit longer and get my work done faster. So I think, yes, your perks definitely showcase who you are as an organization.
That's great. Okay, so Monali, I would like to thank you so much. I just wanted to have your view from what's being like to work with a Brazilian startup. You're working with Vitude super closely with Tatiana, the CEO, and I know you helped her in many of her people challenges. So can you just tell us, like in general lines, how was it to meet a little closer a Brazilian startup, and what did you think about the culture of the Brazilian ecosystem in general from what you saw?
It's been a fantastic experience working with Tatiana and Vitude, especially the work that they do and the mission of the company is so critical during this pandemic. And I really appreciate Tatiana is so eager to do the right thing and build the right team. And, wanting her focus, she manages her time effectively, not just when fundraising or looking marketing, but also understands the investment in HR early on and the importance of it. And so we've talked about a variety of things, starting with hiring. her ability to hire the right people faster, bringing them, onboarding them faster, and then what does that journey look like? And then, what does team effectiveness look like? So how are her leaders doing on her team? What's their psychological safety? So it's been a fantastic experience. Yes, I've really enjoyed it.
That's amazing. I hope we can bring you in person next time. But for now, I would like to thank you so much for giving your time, not only to our startups in 101s, but also to our community in this amazing live stream. Thanks for the work putting together these tips. And I hope everyone enjoyed. So thank you so much, everyone, and see you next time. Thank you, Monali. Have a
Thank you
great
all.
day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.